You're listening to The Greeks Gridiron. Now here's your host, Ethan Haristadoulou.
Welcome back, everybody, to The Greeks Gridiron, into another edition of NFL Power Rankings. And for those of you that are watching and not just listening, yes, I chopped off my hair. The ponytail is gone. I have a bit of a shift going on in my real-life career, and it's something that I'm actually pretty excited to share with you all once it actually becomes finalized, because it's kind of a big deal, but we'll talk about it once I sign off and everything is officially official. But the career shift prompted me to clean up the look a little bit, go for a more professional hairstyle, and I'll just leave it at that for now. We'll talk down the road once things, again, are official. That all being said, following week number 2, we're going to rank all these teams going into week number 3 in what I would consider one of the bigger shifts we have seen in quite some time, going from one season to another. I really feel like the power structure in the NFL is kind of changing a little bit, with so many different head coaches coming in and taking over teams. Also, personnel changes are leading to what is kind of a wild shift. Also, injuries are kind of killing teams that people expected to be really good and might now find themselves in a really tough situation over the next month or so. So there's plenty to discuss. Whether you agree or disagree, fire away in the comment section down below. I love talking with you all. But we'll start. This is, of course, on screen right now, last week's rankings. Again, this is last week's rankings. Let me make that clear. We'll now reset the screen. We are now looking at week number 3. And of course, you'll see at number 32, and this time I have them positioned all the way to the right by themselves. We have the Carolina Panthers sitting at number 32 before I reveal anyone else, because I feel like with the big change that was announced today at quarterback, they definitely deserve a second by themselves. And my, oh my, Bryce Young being benched. This offense is averaging 6 points per game right now. They are averaging, and I've got to shout out NFL Pro, because that website that they have put together over there is crazy with some of the numbers that you can pull. They're averaging negative half a yard on third down right now. Negative half a yard. That is not a position you want to find yourself in. The defense allowed 219 rushing yards this past week. It's clear a change needed to be made. I'm very curious what this does to Bryce Young and what this means for his career going forward, but it is Andy Dalton leading the Carolina Panthers the rest of the way, and in my opinion, are in pole position right now for that number 1 overall pick, all by themselves, way off to the far right side here. The remainder of the number 1 overall pick club, though, includes the Giants at 31, the Titans at 30, the Broncos at 29, and the Commanders at number 28 here. The Giants finding a way to lose to their opponent despite not allowing a single touchdown in the matchup and allowing 7 whole field goals. The score finishing at 21-18, one of the wackier score lines you see, because you assume 21-18, we're talking maybe 3 touchdowns from the winner, and then 18 points. You're looking at, maybe a couple of touchdowns, a 2-point conversion thrown in there. But no, you have 3 touchdowns with a missed extra point and 2 failed 2-point conversions, and then the Commanders winning off of 7 field goals. It felt like one of the more Giant-esque type of games to lose. The defense allowed over 200 yards on the ground. Malik Neighbors, I will say, did look pretty solid. A lot of success on his curl and comeback routes that he was running in this matchup here. Even Daniel Jones looked a little bit better here. But overall, the Giants are in quite the position right now. Things do not look, I think, nearly where anyone was hoping they would be moving towards in terms of just direction right now. This feels like a team, while I would say a bit of a gap between the Panthers and everyone else, the Giants not too far behind, but I would still give that big lead to the Panthers. The Titans at number 30. I think the turnovers by Will Levis are not good, and it's very clear that head coach Brian Callahan is already maybe starting to lose his patience, because you have the pick 6 last week, and then the fumble that he had this week was just downright insane because of, yes, he's being tripped up, but you think in that situation, you're getting tripped up, you're falling to the ground, you're trying to cover up the football and just eat the sack. But no, whether he was trying to reach out and maybe pitch the ball to somebody, or he just fell out that way, for some reason, he's letting his arm go flying out. The ball's flying out of his hand. That was a crazy, crazy turnover. And it's now back-to-back weeks where you just have back-breaking turnovers by Will Levis here. They found themselves in a position to win late, fortunately, though, but unfortunately could not get the job done here. The defense was pretty solid overall. They did crack to Aaron Rodgers late on that final scoring drive that he had there, but I will say that the Titans defense did a pretty solid job keeping pace with their opponents in this matchup. It's just unfortunate that the offense is in a situation right now where it feels like there are massive plays happening, whether it's late in the game or during the game in the middle of the duration of it, where there's just things happening that it feels like the offense is throwing things away, and a lot of it is falling on Will Levis right now. We'll see where they go, but tough start at 0-2 and an ugly 0-2 at that for the Titans. Broncos at number 29. Bo Nix, best way I could describe him right now is like a roller coaster to watch. He is very 50-50. You had that interception in the end zone, but then, he's driving down the field looking solid, dealing with some pressure from the Pittsburgh Steelers, but ultimately you don't have a run game. Bo Nix is your leading rusher right now with 60 yards. I believe, if I'm not mistaken here, he led the team last week and this week in rushing altogether. The defense at least looks somewhat solid and is able to bring some pressure. They're able to do some really good things. Again, I really, really like the edge rushers altogether in Denver. One of my more underrated groups, I would say, in the NFL right now. And the secondary is even performing fairly well, but overall, this offense right now is just kind of a mess, and they're having a really hard time getting anything going, and the Pittsburgh Steelers were an awful matchup for them, and you saw it in the duration of that football game. This is one of those that we'll see what comes of Denver here, but the early reviews are not too great offensively. I like the direction that the defense is in right now, really youthful and exciting group of guys, but things are not looking so great on the offensive side of things. Commanders at number 28, offensive line, 4 sacks allowed, but besides that, this was overall aside from being unable to finish drives, this was a pretty good performance, I would say, overall from the offense. Brian Robinson had 133 yards in the ground. Jaden Daniels really solid, did a good job protecting the football, not putting it in dangerous spots here. The defense, the second half was theirs. They definitely struggled in the first half a little bit, but the second half, they definitely buckled down. That lone touchdown drive aside, looked really good altogether. Benjamin St. Juste and Malik Neighbors were going through a bit of a battle here. St. Juste had a really good game, 3 pass deflections in the matchup, going through that bout with Malik Neighbors there. He also had a forced fumble in the game as well. It was a solid performance nonetheless. You don't necessarily want to be winning every single football game off of 7 field goals, but hey, a win's a win, and you got it done this week. And there was not really a situation where the offense was putting themselves in a spot to lose the football game. And I think that's a plus when you're working with a rookie quarterback right now, new head coach in Dan Quinn, a new system working all together. I think this is a positive step in the right direction for him. Moving into the struggle bus category now, we have ourselves 5 teams altogether, and we are looking at number 27 with the Indianapolis Colts, 26 are the New England Patriots, 25 the Jacksonville Jaguars, 24 the LA Rams, and at number 23 the Chicago Bears. This group did a lot of changing this week here. Now I look at the Colts and Anthony Richardson. This is kind of something that I was worried about that we saw a little bit of last week. The 9 completions for over 200 yards just did not really make a lot of sense. It was one of those things that I feel like you kind of got away with, and the game was probably closer than it really should have been. And then coming into this game here, Richardson has 3 interceptions. The team was 2 for 9 on third downs offensively. You allowed 261 yards rushing on the defensive side of things off of 53 rushing attempts. Green Bay came in and basically told you they were going to run the football from the jump, and it almost felt like like you didn't take them seriously is the best way I can kind of describe that. And it's insane. I mean, you look at the time of possession, Green Bay had over 40 minutes of TOP to just under 20 for the Indianapolis Colts. Like, they could not really sustain drives very well. I'm really not sure where this team goes from here because they looked solid in week number 1, not nearly as good as I think that final score made the game look. You just got away with some really big wow splash plays, but this what we saw this week, even though I was anticipating a Colts win here because I did not expect Malik Willis to have such a good game and I didn't think they'd get bulldozed for 2.5 football fields on the ground, I thought that maybe we'd get a more realistic view of what this team looks like in this matchup here, and unfortunately it's on the scarier side of things and on the better side of things. We'll see where they go, but I am a little bit nervous about the Colts that I root for. The Patriots at 26 here. Moving up from the number one overall pick group here, the offensive line can't pass protect to save their lives or Jacoby Brissett's life. They were allowing about a 40% pressure rate during this game here. But on top of that, Jacoby Brissett has a hard time going deep with the football. The wide receivers, for whatever reason, just don't really feel like a part of the game plan. -5 total targets to your wide receivers, one being that Jalen Polk touchdown. You had 24 passing attempts in that game. And again, only 5 going to your wide receivers. The rest were divvied up between the running backs and tight ends. And it's unfortunate because this offense is really struggling right now in terms of the passing game. They can run block and run the football extremely well. Ramondre Stevenson, really impressive work altogether. And even Antonio Gibson on top of that. I was actually there for the game, and if you notice, I might look a little bit sunburned right now because I was sitting on the sun side of that game here, and I got cooked. There was not a cloud in the sky during that matchup. But the defense is disruptive up front. They've been really good against the run through a couple of weeks here. Only 38 yards allowed to Zach Charbonnet in this one. This is just it's a matter of like you have all your money stacked on one side of the football team and not so much on the other side, and it's really showing for New England. The Jaguars at 25, another tough loss for them. You got a nice flash from Brian Thomas Jr. and what he can bring to this team should he progress in the right direction here with a nice 66-yard reception here. But another one of those situations where the offense just felt like they were stuck in the mud all game long. Offensive line was really struggling themselves, allowing pressure on 41% of the dropbacks they took. 4 sacks allowed on top of that, one of them being that safety that ultimately kind of blew the game for them and put them in a really bad spot to ultimately lose the game in a fairly close situation. But if that doesn't happen, you might be looking at a potential win here rather than a loss. But that offensive line is struggling over there. The defense did not generate quite as much pressure as I was expecting here with a backup left tackle and right tackle starting for the Browns. You only get a couple of sacks there. Decent amount of pressure, but you weren't getting home again against a pair of guys on the bookend of both sides of the O-line that you were hoping you could take advantage of in this matchup, and one I anticipated that they would take advantage of, but they just couldn't quite do it. The Jaguars, I don't really know what to make of them because they have 2 really close losses and against solid teams, but at 0-2, the question that I had coming into the season is this the broken team we saw at the end of last year and 2 losses into the season? And it almost feels like that might be the case. There's a lot to look at, a lot of soul searching to do in Jacksonville. Not quite sure where this team goes either. I'm kind of in the same boat between them and the Colts right now as far as the AFC South goes. Both these 2 teams are just in really ugly spots at the moment. Rams, if you had to write a book report on injuries in the NFL, you would take the Rams and the amount that they are dealing with right now. The amount of guys that have gone down with injury, and especially on the offensive line, it's got to be the Rams. It really does. I mean, the offensive line is in shambles right now. They allowed 5 sacks in the game. They could hardly get any sort of push in the run at all. They could not really open anything up. The team averaged 2.7 yards per attempt on the ground, 53 total yards from their running backs. Like, it was just not a good day for this team at all. They got absolutely slaughtered defensively as well. They could not contain Kyler Murray. James Conner was bullying them on the ground. This is a nightmare situation for the Rams. You came in and you basically lost 4 starters on your offensive line. Puka Nakua's out as well, and you're just... What can you do? You have a star quarterback in Matthew Stafford. You have Cooper Kupp, but if you have everyone, sitting in a hospital bed somewhere, I don't really know how you're going to put together a good offense. And then that in turn also affects the defense here because your offense is flatlined, your defense is gassed, trying to deal with a quarterback that's as mobile as any in the NFL. And from the looks of it, he might be back to where he was prior to all of his injury issues. So the Rams are in a really, really rough spot right now as well. And this is a team that fell extremely far down the rankings from last week into this week because this is more like me just projecting what this team might be going forward. And it's going to be ugly until this offensive line gets healthy. And I can't really imagine much of a turnaround considering the situation that they're in. Then the Bears, to end the struggle bus group at number 23, the offensive line, 3rd in sack and in pressure rate allowed so far this season right now. Caleb Williams looks extremely uncomfortable in the pocket, and he's scrambling, yes, but it's more so for his life rather than him trying to extend and make plays here. And I just don't really know what this team is going to do about this offense right now. They're having a really hard time with everything, and it's unfortunate because this is another one of those things where, like, this is a little bit worse, I would say, in Chicago than in New England, but another situation of where A lot of your money is on the defensive side of things right now. You do have some money spent on the offense, but this is a very defensive, heavily focused team, and a young, inexperienced offensive side, or just a group that isn't really invested in monetarily, and it really is showing right now because the defense is really good. They're 7th in points per game allowed. They're 5th in overall pressure rate. They are solid against the run, middle of the pack right now, and honestly could be a little bit better too as the road continues down through the season. But until this offensive line can protect Caleb Williams for even more than 2.5 seconds, I mean, I'm worried that he's going to start regressing here rather than progressing. I mean, he threw the same interception twice in this game here. Same deep ball down the sideline, left side of the field, and one of them just thankfully got called back because of a PI, I believe, or it was a hold or something like that. He got called back for a penalty, forget what it was, but he threw the same exact interception 2 times in this game. Thankfully, one got called back, so his stat line looks a little bit better, but there is some concern to be had here with what's going on, and the run game is not really there either. It really starts with the offensive line. They've got to do something in Chicago. That has got to get sorted out between now and the trade deadline, and I don't really know if it's going to happen because premium offensive line play is not really something that teams are interested in moving on from, so I have no idea how they're going to sort this out, but something has got to be done. Even if it's as simple as just reshuffling who the 5 guys are starting in the game, something needs to be done in Chicago. Moving into the Jeff Fisher group, for those of you that might be wondering, what does that mean? Jeff Fisher group, the team's hanging somewhere around 500 or so, something along those lines, or at least what I look at as a Jeff Fisher-esque team in that ballpark, give or take a few games. The almost playoff teams right on the outside looking in. At number 22, we have the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, this is one that we'll get into in a second here, but I cannot believe this team is sitting at 0-2 right now. At 21, we have the Cardinals. At number 20, the Raiders. At 19, the Chargers. 18 are the Cleveland Browns. 17 are the Seahawks. 16 are the Atlanta Falcons. And 15, we have the Dallas Cowboys to round up the group. At 22, those Bengals, they played the game they needed to win. Their struggles against the run might have been something that if that was going a little bit better for them, they probably win this game somewhat decisively. But you win the turnover battle. You had the Chiefs right where you needed to in the lead. Ultimately, DPI on that final drive sets the Chiefs up in really good field position to take the lead off that field goal and make the win courtesy of Harrison Butker, and it winds up being the nail in the coffin and you take a loss. There's really not a lot I can say about this Bengals team coming out of that matchup that's extremely negative. The running game, offensively aside, was probably the biggest weakness for them. You had 65 yards from your running backs altogether. But, I mean, they came in with the game plan that they needed to beat this Chiefs team, and I hate to say it comes down to a play like that, but that DPI was about as obvious as it could be. It's not like it wasn't uncatchable or anything. Yeah, it was a late flag, but it was what it was, and that was a clear defensive pass interference penalty. Whether the flag came in a little bit late or not does not really matter. The point is you can't not call that, and I'm glad that they did because that was egregious. The Bengals should have won that game. They're now 0-2 right now in a really tough spot, and if they keep having games break in that way for them, this is a team that's hanging somewhere around 500 or so, maybe like 10-7 come season ends at best, something like that, and they might find themselves on the outside looking in. That's kind of what I see from them right now. The Cardinals at 21, getting out of the struggle bus and into the Jeff Fisher area here. Marvin Harrison Jr. finally arriving, 130 yards and a couple of touchdowns off just 4 receptions here. Not as many targets as I would have liked to see, but it also wasn't necessary for him to get more than those 4 targets that he got in those 4 receptions, I should say, in that matchup there. That is what we should be seeing, or at least close to week in, week out type of production from Marvin Harrison Jr. He is that number 1 for that team. He is a guy that is capable. He has all the tools that you could possibly ask for. The pedigree, the physical traits, the route running, the hands. He's got all of it. This is what I'm expecting from Marvin Harrison, not what we got last week with only 1 reception in 4 yards. The team had 231 yards rushing on the ground. James Conner, as I mentioned earlier, looked really good. Kyler Murray was a complete nightmare. Defense did a really good job and it honestly kind of helps that, the offense becomes one-dimensional over there in LA, and they basically are just trying to play catch-up here as you're torching their defense drive after drive for points. But defense did a really good job as well. But, I mean, the offense, you come away from this game and you have to highlight them because they were unbelievable in this game here, completely taking it to the Rams. At number 20, the Raiders here. This is one of those teams where things kind of extend beyond the game of football, and I can't believe they came back and managed to come out with a victory in that game here, because I thought the Ravens had that game won and put away. It's funny because I was at the Patriots game, but I have Red Zone on, so I can at least kind of keep tabs of things as the games are going on. I'm sitting in my chair, roasting in the sun, watching the Patriots, keeping an eye on Red Zone as everything's happening. And I cannot believe that this team managed to battle it back and get it done. But again, it goes back to my point of there are things that extend beyond football, and these guys love playing for Antonio Pierce. There are things that happen in sports that transcend the sport itself, and the love that these players have for their coach and the fight that they are willing to put up for their guy is unbelievable. This is a team that was dead to rights last year with Josh McDaniels as their head coach, things flipping around late in the year, and now they're coming here into Baltimore to knock off the Ravens and send them packing at 0-2. The run game needs to come to life a little bit. That is still an issue, but I mean, that defense is solid. They did a really good job in this game here, keeping the game close enough for the offense to be able to battle back and win. If they can get a run game going, the Raiders are a team that you might need to really look out for. They did not look great last week, but they did a great job bouncing back this week, going into hostile territory, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens with the Raiders from here on out. The Chargers at number 19, J.K. Dobbins. It seems like he's back. I was a little but I was unsure, I guess I should say, as to what exactly J.K. Dobbins was going to look like in this season here, because the last couple of years are basically a wash for him. He's been dealing with injuries, and he's hardly played the last couple of seasons. But 17 carries, 131 yards, plus another 59 from Gus Edwards on top of that. You want to talk about a ground and pound offense. Jim Harbaugh was not kidding about running the football. They are just bulldozing teams on the ground right now. You've got a rough and tough offensive line that is clearly giving the defensive fronts they're going against some problems here, as you're sitting here ripping off nearly 200 yards a game right now. You shut down a Panthers offense that, honestly, it doesn't feel like takes too much to do, but you did a great job shutting them down. They had 159 yards at best. Defense is allowing right now only 6.5 points per game. This is a Chargers team that at 2-0, I did not expect to look this good. There was a lot of people talking about the Jim Harbaugh bump and whatnot and what he can do for teams when he comes in. Whether this is just a really good luck situation because of the two games and opponents that they got to play early on in the season, only time will tell. But I mean, this Chargers team looks really good right now, and they're healthy. They are aggressive on offense, and on not only that, they are tough. Like, they will beat you into submission. It's not something you really see from too many teams right now. So it's a unique offense that teams are trying to deal with defensively. And then the defense, Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack, they're both working right now together in tandem. That is an awesome group to have here to help what is a defense that's kind of been suspect over the last handful of years, but even that seems like it's been turned around. Like, it's really impressive what's going on in LA right now. And then this is a team that's 2-0, yes. I have them at 19 right now because I'm still unsure of if I really buy what's going on at this moment here. Give me a really good opponent in the next week or two that they wind up beating, and I can really be sold on what's going on. But I like what I'm seeing. I'm impressed. Don't get me wrong. Browns at number 18, winning despite having 13 penalties for 100 yards altogether. I saw some people, touting about the whole Deshaun Watson's back thing. I don't know where that's coming from and why people are acting like he had some unbelievable game. I would say he did a better job than he did last week, took much better care of the football, did not put the team in a position to lose at the very least. The pass rush, far more effective this week, going after their opposing quarterback and just doing a great job of making Trevor Lawrence uncomfortable. You allowed only 78 yards on the ground to the running backs. This was a far more complete effort from the Browns. Offensively, there is still clearly some work to be done here, but with Jerome Ford working and Jerry Jeudy getting real involved late in that game, and ultimately, I would say a big reason as to why they came away with the victory in that matchup here. Shout out Jerry Jeudy because he looked really good this week. This is a team that I'm not really sure of what to make right now because you have a solid win against an opponent that's 0-2 but has been competitive in both their losses now. And then you also got a shellacking via the Cowboys, who got their own shellacking this weekend now. So not really sure of where to make the Browns, hence why I have them somewhere in the middle. The Seahawks at number 17 was not a pretty game per se. You kind of lucked out with some big errors via the Patriots, in my opinion, but you are 2-0 nonetheless. You can only do what you can, and that is win football games if your opponent allows you to, and the Patriots definitely did just that. DK Metcalf got that big touchdown catch off of a blown coverage between it was Kyle Duggar and Christian Gonzalez. It seemed like there was a little bit of miscommunication as to maybe how far back Duggar was supposed to be on that play, and not necessarily sure what happened there, but definitely some miscommunication going on with that. Jackson Smith and Jigba was giving them problems all game long. I think he had like 12 receptions in the game, something like that. It was crazy. It felt like every other play he was getting the football in the passing game. The offensive line definitely is still in need of some work. They are struggling with teams that are really good against with the pass rush, and both Denver and I would say New England as well, two pretty aggressive groups when it comes to getting after the quarterback here, but ultimately the Seahawks have more talent, and honestly I would say that the Patriots kind of got out-coached. There are some situations where the Patriots were deciding to do things like punt the football in spots that I just did not really agree with, where you have a team that is you're not expected to win a lot, so be aggressive, get after it, go and try and win a game. Like, don't play passively. And that was something that I heard a lot of the New England sports talk radio talk about the last like day or so as well, is just go win the football game. Don't play passively. You're playing with house money, being 1-0, and be aggressive. You don't really have a lot to lose, so just do what you can to see if you can win. Worst case scenario, you lose, and you lost anyways playing passively. So be aggressive. Like, that's kind of what I want to see. But Seahawks took advantage of that, did a really good job. They're 2-0. I am interested in how they will fare against an opponent that is a little more up to snuff, because having the Denver Broncos and the New England Patriots open your season while 2-0 is great, is definitely cause for maybe people questioning your actual 2-0 record and where you may really stand. And that's kind of where I have them at 17 right now. Again, another one of those teams, not 100% sure as to what they're doing here. Really talented team, but some tight wins against some not so great opponents so far. Falcons at 16. Battling to the final whistle here. Cousins getting under center far more this week. Clearly a man on a mission to silence some of the doubters here, and he honestly looked a lot better this week than he did last week. The running game was incredible. They did a great job on the ground. Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier averaging 6.4 yards per attempt combined between the two. Defense putting the clamps down on the passing game. Saquon Barkley was pretty effective. He had that big drop, and ultimately that led to the Falcons having an opportunity to capitalize to get that final scoring drive going, taking advantage of some extremely soft coverage on that final drive to win the game, but ultimately shutting things down defensively, doing a really good job, taking advantage of mistakes being made, and they come out with a victory that a lot of people, and I know for a fact everyone on the Monday Night Football broadcast team, did not expect to have a Falcons win here, as everyone picked the Eagles, but ultimately the Falcons got the job done. They actually dropped back one spot this week despite their win, and I want to address that for anyone who may notice. The reason for that is more so because of teams that leapfrogged them more than anything else, because the Falcons are now 1-1, really ugly loss last week, and now you have a really good win. Don't get me wrong, but you're very 50-50 in your performance so far, and I think having them at 16 right now is kind of reflective of that. And then the Cowboys at number 15. Struggles to finish drives early, basically did this team in from the jump. You cannot just be settling for field goals, having mistakes where you're not finishing drives, things like that, turning the ball over. Dak Prescott obviously with a couple of interceptions there, but you between that and then your defense just looking absolutely unprepared for what was coming with that New Orleans Saints offense. They rattled off 5 straight touchdown drives in that first half. Touchdown, 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 touchdown. That defense looked like they had no idea what hit them come halftime. And at that point, I mean, you're emotionally just devastated at that point, because this is a playoff team. You're riding the high of CeeDee Lamb and Dak Prescott both getting paid. All is well. And here you are at halftime. Your defense has just allowed 35 points. Your offense can barely get a single thing going. This was a crazy result considering what they just did last week. But you can point to now this game and even last week's game where the offense has not really been that impressive. It's not like they scored all, 33 points, 34 points that they put up in last week's matchup. A lot of that came from the defense, special teams, capitalizing on mistakes by Cleveland. And I think the offense was only good for 14 of their points, 17 of their points, something like that. It wasn't like they were putting up a ton of points last week as well. So now you have back-to-back weeks of not so great offensive performance, and you have to look at, well, what is going on there? So definitely something to keep an eye on here. I have the Cowboys at the top of the Jeff Fisher group, so a team that probably sits at best, somewhere around 10-7, maybe 11-6, but on the outside looking in, depending on how good the NFC winds up being. But this is definitely something to keep an eye on here. I don't doubt that the Cowboys could bounce back, but through 2 weeks of play, the offense definitely has some issues going on, and I think you can't just sit back and say that that's not the case based off the performance we've got from these first 2 weeks of football. Now, moving into the fun side of things, where there's a lot of good feels and excitement, we have the playoff hopefuls category here. Now, in this group, we have the Ravens sitting at number 14, the Vikings at 13, the Dolphins at 12, the Jets at 11, Packers at 10, the Eagles at 9, Steelers at 8, and then the 49ers at 7 here. Lots of movement going on here. Starting with the Ravens at 0-2 at number 14. I will start this off by saying that, yes, I am probably giving this team far too much benefit of the doubt. Maybe because I have so much respect for the Ravens organization and just how competitive they always are. But there is something to say about, one, how good this team is, at least on paper, the coach that they have in John Harbaugh, but also how tight their losses were. You're talking like a literal toe of a loss to the Kansas City Chiefs last week, and now you're talking a really tight collapse in the fourth quarter. So yeah, you could say Ravens at 0-2 above some teams that actually have wins, and hell, the Chargers are 2-0, and I have them above them. I believe in the Ravens, so this is one of those things where I have I have some respect. And you look at the game here, they held Las Vegas to just 27 yards rushing, back-to-back 3-and-outs, kind of swung momentum late in that game here. You had the 3rd and goal DPI on Brandon Stevens that leads to a game-tying touchdown. Just a lot of mental errors and little mistakes here that cost you the football game, or just poor situational football altogether. The fact that you're settling for 3-and-out and 3-and-out back-to-back late in a game where you're trying to keep the Raiders at bay, and you're giving them opportunity after opportunity now to find themselves a way back into this football game down late in the fourth. This is one of the better 0-2 teams I feel like I've seen as of recently in the last few years of the NFL. Again, I'm probably giving them a lot of benefit of the doubt. You could definitely say that. Maybe I'm wrong on this one here, but I'm going to trust my gut on this one and keep them in the playoff hopefuls for now. But there is definitely some concern with the Ravens' ability to finish football games right now. The Vikings at number 13. This was the by far biggest correction I had to make going through this week. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the Vikings were sitting at the backside of the Jeff Fisher group, or it might have been right at the top of the struggle bus. I don't necessarily remember where I had them, but I've got to say, I am impressive. I'd have Minnesota even a little bit higher had it not been for the Justin Jefferson injury. That does have a little bit of concern to go with it here. Does he wind up missing time? If he does, how much time does he end up missing? There is definitely some concern with that and how it's going to affect the effectiveness of this offense here. But Sam Darnold has impressed me to this point here, but what's really impressed me is the defensive side of things here. For them to come into this game and absolutely manhandle the offensive line of San Francisco, 6 sacks on Brock Purdy was not anywhere near on my radar, and I've got to give the Vikings the credit. They definitely have earned their spot here in the playoff hopefuls group. I don't know if long-term I really buy what's going on here, but they absolutely dominated one of the worst teams in the league, or I shouldn't even put air quotes on that. Pretend I didn't do that. That wasn't right. But they dominated one of the worst teams in the NFL right now, and then you come in and you upset, and probably one of the biggest upsets of the weekend, a team that a lot of people have pegged as a legitimate Super Bowl contender, and you knock them off in convincing fashion, in a dominant fashion defensively. You've got to give them their flowers for that one here. So 13 is where I have them now. Is this something long-term? We'll see. But, I mean, you can't take away what they've done. You're supposed to beat down on the bad teams. The Vikings did that. If you're a legit playoff contender, you're supposed to beat the other good teams, and they did that. You could point to some injuries that are happening to the San Francisco 49ers right now, but a win is a win in my book, and over the San Francisco 49ers, considering where they've been the last handful of years, that is a big win in my book. The Dolphins at number 12, and this is one you could argue maybe they belong a little bit lower here because I am legitimately concerned as to what this team looks like going forward here. Devon Achane is an absolute stud. I just want to make sure I mention that before I get into the bad here. That guy can play football, plain and simple here. That being said, before going down with a concussion, Tua did not look great. He had a really hard time finding guys open, 3 interceptions before he finally went down with that concussion. I really hope that he is good to go and that he is fully and completely healthy before he comes back in and plays football for Miami. I know the pressure is there because he wants to come back. He wants to help lead this team to another playoff run, but he needs to be healthy before he gets back. Conversation about retirements aside, I'm not going to sit here and do that, but I really hope that he is just 100% healthy and ready to go whenever it is that he does come back. On top of that, offensively, I mean, Tyreek Hill got locked down. There was really not a lot that was going well for them offensively, and then the defense found themselves in a ton of bad spots, just having a really hard time dealing with the Bills, getting overwhelmed because they kept finding themselves back on the field at a moment's notice off of Tua interceptions. This was just overall a really ugly performance for Miami. The team is talented enough that I think they could hang in there while Tua's gone, and then when he comes back, they can ultimately still be fighting for a playoff spot. I wouldn't be shocked if they somehow wind up being 7 or 6 in the AFC if everything kind of goes their way. But if you're sitting here saying that there's no shot that this team makes the playoffs, especially now that Tua's out and Skylar Thompson's going to be the quarterback, I kind of hear you. I will say that this week's power rankings, one of the more unsure power rankings I think I've ever put together, period, in the 3.5 years or so that I've been doing this, because so much is going on right now between injuries to good teams, and then on top of that, you have teams that nobody really expected being very competitive right now, that there's plenty of conversation to be had, and I wouldn't sit here and die on a hill for too much at this very moment right now with where we are. The Jets at number 11, a much-needed win for Aaron Rodgers and the New York Jets. Rodgers, good enough. Did not need to be great, good enough. 176 yards, couple of touchdown passes. Defense did enough to keep the Titans at bay. I will say that this game was a little bit closer than I would have liked to see, but ultimately they got the job done, and it was what they needed to do. And on top of that, Will McDonald had himself a pretty darn good game. Someone I want to make sure I shout out this week because he had a really good performance. 3 sacks. One of them was kind of like a comedy strip sack because that was the play that Will Levis got tripped up on. He's literally laying on the ground and Will Levis just ran over his leg, completely trips. The fumble happens, ball comes out. So that's a strip sack for Will McDonald right there. Good on him for literally laying on the ground and getting credit for something like that. That'll be a nice win for the stat column on his end. But overall, a nice performance. The other 2 sacks he had, really good play. One of them, he actually was dropping back and then he caught Will Levis scrambling out of the pocket. So it was a really good play on his part. But overall, this was the quality bounce back that the Jets needed to have after a really tough loss last week. So good on them. I think that this team, if they can play like this week in and week out, should be very competitive, should be a playoff team. Packers at number 10, no love, no problem. Malik Willis comes in, absolutely manages this game perfectly. You don't have to do anything crazy in this matchup here. He honestly did have some good plays here and there. I mean, his touchdown pass was nice, did a great job running on the ground as well. But you look at just his ability to take care of the football and go with the game plan of we're going to run the football 53 times, just don't give it up. And Malik Willis did just that. Great game planning by Matt LaFleur. Defense looked really good. They made life basically miserable for Indianapolis. They could not put up a point on the scoreboard until the third quarter, and that was just a field goal, and they ultimately get a touchdown late in the game. But it was one of those games where it really felt like, yeah, the score was close, but Indianapolis was just not going to come back. Like they could not function offensively, could not stop making mistakes. The defense for Green Bay was just capitalizing again and again and again. And another win that I did not see coming here. I honestly thought Malik Willis would be the undoing of this team here in this matchup and ultimately cost them the game. But I ate my words on that one. Tip my cap to them for that W. Eagles at number 9, mental mistakes. Big mental mistakes costing you the game. The drop by Saquon Barkley was huge. The poor throw by Jalen Hurts, the final interception to seal the game. I mean, I understand you need to try to score there, but that was a play where you had pressure literally right on top of you as you're throwing that football away, and maybe he did get hit as that ball was coming out. I didn't really go back to look, but it looked like maybe he did. There is a possibility that maybe that affects the throw, but like you got to just throw that away. Like you have time, you have a timeout, like just throw the football away. That was an awful decision to make. Mental mistakes again, killing you there late. And the defense, after having a good performance last week, at least against the run, really bad this week. 152 yards in the ground, 5.4 yards allowed per attempt. I don't really know what to make of the Eagles because it was a tight win last week, and now you have this really ugly loss at home to the Atlanta Falcons. I don't want to say really ugly, but just a game that you shouldn't have lost. Like, that was a game you should have put away. You were in position to win that football game, and you have to settle for the 3 points. Like, and just to give you an idea as to where my headspace was as I'm watching this matchup here, I mean, I see them fail that third down after Saquon Barkley drops the ball. As soon as he says it, I sit there and I say, well, they just lost the game. Like, this is the momentum swing that the Atlanta Falcons need. Kirk Cousins looked extremely comfortable running that 2-minute offense, and I understand the fear of not wanting to give up the big play late in that game, but they were a little too safe with just how far back they were dropping everyone in coverage. And I understand wanting to keep everything in front of you, but they were a little too comfortable keeping things in front of them. And it ultimately lost them the football game. Like, it's not like Atlanta was beating you over the top all game long. I just don't really understand what the thought process was on there defensively either. Like, it was just a really frustrating finish to a game that you would really hope is not what ends up being the end result, all things considered, with the ball driving. You're basically under 2 minutes at this point here, and you're sitting at, the 4 or 5 yard line, and you have the opportunity to get the go-ahead score. Just not the way you want to end that football game. So a really tough loss for the Eagles. I still think they're extremely talented. I still think they're going to be competing week in and week out, hence why I still have them at number 9. But these are the games you don't want to lose like that. Steelers at number 8. Justin Fields was good in this game here. Honestly, better than he was last week. The touchdown drive by far being his best. He completed 4 of 6 passes over the middle. For those of you that were making fun of his passing chart last week as he was not throwing the football over the middle, he had 6 throws and he completed 66% of them. So good on him for that. Joey Porter on the defensive side, though, my goodness, this guy is turning into a legit lockdown corner that can go ahead and follow the best wide receiver of the opposing team. He locked up Cam Sutton to just 1 reception from the 20 some odd times that he lined up across from him, just 1 catch altogether. I was a little bit surprised that Pittsburgh didn't blitz more. They only blitzed 18% of the time, but they still managed a pressure rate of about 36%. But that game went pretty much how I expected it to go. There was a little bit less in terms of scoring than I anticipated. I think my final score prediction for that game was like 19-16, but it ended up being 13-6. Like, there were even less points than I was anticipating. Hopefully this offense in Pittsburgh can put it together week after week and maybe get a little bit better here. I would say that this week was an improvement over last, but I'm curious to see where this team goes, because you're now 2-0 with Justin Fields, and Russell Wilson is sitting there nursing that calf injury, but Justin Fields isn't giving the game away. You're winning with defense, which is not something you see too often in the NFL these days anymore, it feels. I'm fine letting the Steelers roll as is. Like, I know you're not supposed to lose a job because of injury, but you're winning football games, and it's working. And Justin Fields, for what it's worth, looked solid in this game here. Not perfect by any means, but looked solid. Then to wrap up this group, the San Francisco 7. The San Francisco 49ers at number 7. Big thing for me was just the offensive line, the struggles that they were dealing with against Minnesota. 6 sacks allowed. Despite that, Purdy still playing his ass off, 319 yards. He had 8.9 yards per attempt. mental mistakes are really what kind of cost this team, in my opinion, as well. You had Purdy with the ball slip coming out of his hands, turning into an interception. The defense allowed that 97-yard Justin Jefferson touchdown. On top of that, the injuries that are kind of mounting in San Francisco now. We're talking a real big issue in San Francisco, and this is partly why I knocked them out of the Super Bowl contender spot, because you're looking at injuries now to obviously Christian McCaffrey, which who knows when he's coming back now at this point. George Kittle, he got knocked out of the game. Deebo Samuel, it sounds like he's going to miss time now as well. If you're going into a game where you don't have Kittle, Deebo, or Christian McCaffrey, you're now looking at Jordan Mason and Brandon Ayuk as your two guys, and thankfully Jordan Mason is like talk about some luck having a guy like him being your backup running back, because he went 20 for 100 again this game. So you at least have some production coming from these guys that are stepping in. But Brandon Ayuk's about to earn his contract. I definitely feel in the next couple of weeks here, it really feels like he is going to be put to the absolute test and earn his money. So I'm looking forward to seeing what the 49ers do as far as combating this adversity, but they are in a really, really tough spot right now. And then to wrap up the rankings here, moving into the Super Bowl contenders category, we are looking at up at the very top here. We have the Saints at number 6. We'll get into that in a second. That's a big leap. At number 5, the Detroit Lions. At number 4, the Buffalo Bills. At number 3, the Houston Texans. At number 2, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And then at number 1, of course, the Kansas City Chiefs sitting at the top of the mountain. The Saints at number 6. Them and the Vikings were the two massive climbers here. I'm not 100% sure off the top of my head who jumped the most. It was either them or the Vikings. But the Saints, my goodness, I was off the Derek Carr bandwagon coming into this season, and I even proclaimed that pretty loudly and embarrassingly at this point here, because Derek Carr is now sitting on nearly 450 yards passing, 5 touchdowns to just 1 interception, with a 77% completion percentage under his belt through 2 games. The offensive line has done a really good job dealing with pressure, allowing just pressure on just 25.6% of dropbacks, which is 8th lowest in the NFL. So a top 10 team in terms of keeping the pressure off of Derek Carr. Alvin Kamara is averaging 5.7 yards per carry right now. He has 4 touchdowns on the season after that 3-touchdown performance this week, looking more like the 2020 Alvin Kamara than he has the last couple of years. And then the defense. 14.5 yards per game allowed, only 2 touchdowns allowed between these first 2 weeks. And I know they played the Panthers last week, but this defense has been lights out now for 2 games. And one of their opponents was a Dallas Cowboys team that looked pretty good last week, but obviously is having offensive issues. Then you look at the numbers even further. 3rd in rushing yards allowed. They are 10th in pressures on defense. This team, crazily enough, looks like the most complete team in the NFL. They are hot out of the gate, and I don't know if they'll be able to maintain this through the duration of the season. But I am definitely eating a bowl full of my words right now as far as the Saints go, because I was worried about the offensive line and them being too old, but it seems like veteran experience with a good mix of maybe some youth here and there on the defensive side of things, and even on the offensive side, is paying dividends for this team right now. So we'll see where the Saints go. They have blown me away right now. But at this very moment, 2 games into the season, I have them at number 6, but they are looking like the most viable Super Bowl option through 2 weeks of play. If you just go based off of numbers alone, opponents not considered, just what they have done has been extremely impressive. The Lions at number 5. Aiden Hutchinson is a literal paid quarterback assassin for the Detroit Lions, I've got to say. 4.5 sacks. That guy was a lunatic in this matchup here, and is a big reason why that game was so close, because he was doing a great job of helping slow things down against Tampa Bay's offense here. But a couple of Jared Goff interceptions and just some really untimely things happening offensively puts you in a tough spot and doesn't allow you to get enough points on the board. Jameson Williams making some big plays again here. I'm really excited to see what he does, because I was excited about him coming into Detroit a couple of years ago. Obviously, the injury wipes out the first year. Suspension wipes out the first 6 games of his second year. We're finally getting to see Jameson Williams in this offense, and it's exceeding expectations, at least out of the gate here. So I'm excited to see what he turns into. But another strong performance by the defense. You hold Tampa Bay's running backs to just 40 yards. Chris Godwin was really the only issue you had with them. Ultimately, just the offense failing to be as good as they were last week does them in. They get a tough loss. But I mean, this Lions team, especially defensively, Big improvements. And this is how complete this team needs to be. Yes, you lose a heartbreaker in this game here, and you want to win that matchup, but this Lions team, even at 1-1, looks more complete than what they were last year, and that's really exciting to see because I look at Tampa Bay as a really good football team, and for them to, you go down swinging in a tight contest, yeah, it sucks you lost, but it's not like you lost bad. The Bills at number 4, defense, opportunistic. Have been in bold letters on my notes here. 3 interceptions off of Tua. The offense on their end, no offensive turnovers, taking care of the football, taking what their defense is giving them and setting them up with great field position. And James Cook, I think, has officially arrived, put his skills out there for everyone to see on Thursday Night Football. 3 touchdowns in that matchup there. Everyone is finally getting to see what James Cook can do for this offense, and I think even Buffalo might be starting to see what James Cook can do for this offense here. I have been pounding for a far more balanced attack for a while, and I know last week I said, Josh Allen throwing the cape on and him doing his thing to help win that game last week, and he can do that if need be, but I think that the Bills are at their best when Josh Allen is playing well, he's taking care of the football, but also James Cook is providing a legitimate rushing attack and being a versatile back for them to use out of the backfield. The defense as well, I cannot believe that they are performing at the level that they have been performing at. And I know Tua got knocked out in that game, but it was pretty late in the game. Like, they were already having a very impressive performance before the Tua injury. I can't believe how good that defense still is, despite the amount of talent they have lost over the last few years. On top of that, like, guys go, and then it's next man up over there in Buffalo with the defense, and it's extremely impressive what they're doing there. I had them as a team initially. I think they were the lead team in the Jeff Fisher group, so I had them right on the outside looking into the playoffs. I'm a couple of weeks into this now, and I'm banging the table for the Bills as a contender. Texans at number 3, Nico Collins, great at football, and I'm glad that everyone got to see it on Sunday Night Football. It was not a pretty game. It was pretty ugly. The offense definitely had a tough time dealing with a Chicago Bears defense that is aggressive and they will make you fight and work for every single yard and point that you want to put on the board there. But Nico Collins, 8 catches, 135 yards, a touchdown. This guy is a problem, and people are starting to learn and hear who he is. D'Amico Ryans had one goal in mind: force Caleb Williams to win, and he couldn't do it. He sent a blitz, 41% of Caleb Williams dropbacks, and you could tell Caleb Williams was feeling that blitz coming play after play after play, and it got hot from that blitz late in the game. You could see when, especially getting into crunch time there, it almost felt like they were blitzing every play, if not every other play. And you could tell that D'Amico and that defense, they smelled blood in the water, and you saw it. And Caleb Williams, for what it's worth, put up a good fight, but my goodness, they went after him and they made him crumble. And I am very excited to see what this defense can do down the road to some of these better offenses here, because they've been really good through a couple of weeks. They got burned on a couple of big plays last week, and I think that score that they had against the Colts, it's not as truthful as you might think. That game was not really as close as that scoreboard indicated, in my opinion. The Colts got away with a couple of really big lucky plays. This Texans team is legit, and they are going to be a problem in the AFC. And I think right now it's the Chiefs, and then it's them as far as the power structure goes. Bills might have something to say about it, but I think I would give a slight edge to the Texans right now. The Buccaneers at number 2. Baker Mayfield is a gamer, but the defense, this is a young, up-and-coming defense. Another team that lost a decent amount, but just next man up mentality. You have all these guys you've been drafting the last couple of years as your defense was kind of starting to age a little bit. They're back to being a fairly young group, and you have guys that are stepping up and making plays. And you slow down a Lions offense that at the end of last season was torching people, looked really good, and absolutely beat the Rams in a submission late in that game, going through overtime at the end there. The Buccaneers were not going to have any of that. The defense shut them down, held them to 16 points. This is the Buccaneers team that I don't think you want to mess with. That's kind of how I look at them right now. They have a really young and just super athletic, super tough defense to deal with. And Baker Mayfield, I'm a Baker guy. I've always been a Baker guy. I think the Cleveland Browns did him so dirty, and the Browns are kind of catching the butt end of that now. But that's a conversation for another day. Baker's a gamer, and he's going to have this team in a position to win not only a division title, but I think a little bit more than that. And then the Chiefs sitting at number 1. It wasn't pretty. Wasn't the way that you'd probably want to be winning that football game. Big DPI sets you up in a position to ultimately win off that Harrison Butker kick. But the Chiefs always seeming to find a way. They get the job done. Isaiah Pacheco going down with an injury. It sounds like a fibula fracture, if I'm not mistaken. Because fibula, or is it I believe it's fibula. I believe it's a fibula fracture. Wow, that stumble all over that. Why don't me? But fibula fracture. That's going to be tough for the backfield. I know they have Steele back there. I know they have Samaje Perine. But that is definitely going to limit the offense a little bit because Isaiah Pacheco runs harder than anyone else. We'll see what happens there, but this is a team that, and I will continue to say this basically week in and week out at this point, to be the best, you have to beat the best, and the Chiefs are 2-0 right now, and if Patrick Mahomes is in, I have a really hard time betting against him. Like, this is one of those teams that I'm probably going to pick to win every single week. I'll accept the 3 or 4 losses I take on that because I have a really hard time picking against Kansas City right now. They're just they find a way to win every single week. Steve Spagnuolo does great stuff over there on defense. Andy Reid's just drawing up all kinds of crazy plays, and this team is going to, over the next month or so, we're going to watch this team evolve probably into a more passing-oriented offense now, especially with the Isaiah Pacheco injury. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what Rashee Rice, Travis Kelce, and Xavier Worthy can do as a trio and tandem that are heavily focused in the offense now. We're going to see some interesting stuff out of KC over these next few weeks. But those are my power rankings. That's my thoughts coming out of week number 2, going into week number 3. Again, whether you agree or disagree, comment down below. Would love to hear from you all. But if you made it to the end, I greatly appreciate it. I'll see you all next time. Have a good one.